I recorded a whole other introduction to this episode, and then after I was done recording, word went round that Olivia Newton-John had passed away. Now, if you listen to the show, you know that Magic by Olivia Newton-John is one of my formative songs and still one of my favorite songs of all time. And so it's sad to hear that she's now gone. And I think as a tribute, all of us should listen to Magic by Olivia Newton-John today, okay? And farewell to Olivia. Now, let's move on with today's regularly scheduled program. We are doing an episode all about songs called Love on the Rocks, of which there are probably more than you realize. And I'll tell you all about them on the other side. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. Where does the term on the rocks come from? Because we've all heard it, right? You're hanging out at your local watering hole on a Monday morning, getting ready to record a podcast, and some sad sack comes in off the docks. Union's been on strike. He's down on his luck. It's tough, man. It's so tough. And he says to the bartender, he says, "Give me a Diet Coke on the rocks, Jack, and keep 'em coming." On the rocks. I discovered a couple of compelling potential origin stories for this term, on the rocks. Now, one of them says that this dates back to the land before ice, when you couldn't just go to the coolerator, get yourself a cube, put it in your glass. And so what people would do is that they would go to the river, because the river came off the ocean or a glacier or something like that. And the river was cold, and so they would take a couple of rocks, a couple of stones out of the river, put it in their glass, have their drink on the rocks. Or they would take their bottle and they would put it in the river, or they would put it amongst the cold stones in the river, and thus the drink, again, would be on the rocks. Now, some people have debunked that, saying horse hockey. And I don't know what's right or what isn't right. Other people say this term actually comes from after. It comes from the land after ice. When you had a coolerator and a freezer, and bars would get like a big block of ice delivered for the day, and when you ordered your whiskey, they would hack off some ice and it would come off in chunks. And they had colorful language back in those days, kids. And so the slang term for ice became rocks. Yeah, Johnny, put it on the rocks for me, Hard to say. And then there's, of course, the term on the rocks as referencing something going bad. Now, this one I think we can more reliably put into a seafaring tradition. This notion of navigating your ship accidentally into shallow water and winding up on the rocks. And what happens when a ship hits the rocks, kids? All breaks apart. You're going around the southern tip of Africa, going around the Horn. You get it wrong. You navigate too far inland. You wind up on the rocks and your ship gets busted up. So what we have here is allusions to drinking and allusions to things breaking up. And that is perfect, kids, for your pop music, these notions of drinking and breaking up. And guess what? There's been a buttload, should I say a boatload, of songs over the years called Love on the Rocks. And we're going to look at some of them right now because it's an interesting study. I had no idea. And I will unfold the origin of this podcast episode as we go. There's been a lot of tunes called Love on the Rocks, and I had no idea until I started digging around. We're going to do 10 of them if I have time. We're going to go through them fairly quickly. But I thought the way to do this, because you got to do it somehow, is to do it chronologically, all right? So we're going to begin in the year 1963 with a tune called Love on the Rocks from the album Love on the Rocks by Julie London. Do you know Julie London? Julie London, back in the 40s as a teenager, was living in Los Angeles working as an elevator operator. Weren't things classy back in the 40s? People were drinking stuff on the rocks, and when you went to a hotel or something and you got in the elevator, there was a person whose job it was to run the elevator. Wow. Julie London was one of these people, okay? And by all accounts, she was kind of a stunning looking, teenager, very beautiful, and that played well in the 40s, man. And so this producer or somebody, an agent, somebody connected to Hollywood, got into Julie London's elevator and said, wow, you're a looker. Why don't you come down and have a screen test? This is the way it used to be in Hollywood, man. So Julie London did that. And from there, got into like the movie business and started recording. And one of the tunes, her first record, I think, was called Love on the Rocks. And so I checked out this song and man, really, really great. Okay. Now we're going back. This was 1963. All right. Julie London has got this really sultry, smoldery nightclub jazz kind of voice. Can you picture that? Can you hear it in your head? And this tune, Love on the Rocks, is just straight up nightclub jazz, man. You can hear it. You can hear it in your head. This sultry voice from this woman singing in a nightclub. Very, very cool tune. And I loved it. I got to be straight up, man. I really, really love this tune, Love on the Rocks by Julie London. I had never heard of her or it before I began researching this episode. Now, we need to look at some of the lyrics. This is not necessarily an episode about which one is best. I have my opinions on that. But music is subjective, okay? And so we can look at the mechanics of it and say, well, this one's better or that one's better. But it doesn't matter, man. It's what moves you that matters. And this, Love on the Rocks by Julie London, moved me in that sultry, smoky jazz way. But let's check some of the lyrics just for a bit of fun, okay? We'll dig into the lyrics on some of these. I'm not going to read all of the lyrics to everything, but I will hand select a few just to give you the flavor. So here's Julie London in 1963. A jigger of lying, garnished with fights, some bitters for crying, long unhappy nights, a dash of lost dreams, then stir with regret, shake well and pour, then drink and forget. Whoa! After this drink, I won't even care. Love on the rocks, time to get high. I'll drink to love, here's love in your eye. Pop with a bubble, make it a double. This is my last toast to love on the rocks. Oh! This is one of those ones, and we run into this over and over and over again with this theme, where we're talking about both definitions of on the rocks. We're drinking, and we're talking about something falling apart. Well done, Julie London. I'm not sure who wrote the song. I'm pretty sure it was not her. But I like this line, I'll drink to love, here's love in your eye. Not here's mud in your eye, but if this is a love gone bad, I guess it's gone all muddy. So here's love in your eye, Jack. You can tell this is a woman scorned. She's bitter, it's falling apart. She's drowning her sorrows in a glass, man. And I don't know how much women were allowed to express that. Maybe by the 60s, this concept of women drinking was okay. I mean, you got to go back to the 20s. You got to go back to the 20s for when women started going hog wild, and that was kind of acceptable. The Roaring 20s. A lot of the Roaring 20s was about women coming out of these boxes, I suppose, that they had been put in, these traditional roles. Because during World War I, women came out of the household and into the factories and were making all of those munitions, America, Canada, UK. It was women who were working in the factories and beginning to develop a certain independence and sense that they can be more than just housewives, you know what I mean? Like, we can contribute in different ways. We can have freedom too, man, and then they got the right to vote, etc., etc. In the Roaring 20s, you know, you've got the flappers, and you've got those cool hats, and women out on the scene drinking. So maybe by 1963, it's okay for a woman to be drowning her sorrows, not some sort of scandal that they'd get upset about. And here we have Julie London singing this dark, smoldery jazz song about a love gone bad. And her love was on the rocks. Now, the true metric, the true measure of whether a tune is any good or not, as you and I both know, is how many streams it gets on Spotify. Spotify is the tastemaker, kids, all right? Spotify tells us who's got it and who ain't got it. And I'll tell you right now, Julie London's Love on the Rocks has 34,302 streams. Wowzers! Julie's pulling it in hand over fist. The estate of Julie London. And I love this tune. I really freaking do. The more I listen to it, the more it grows on me. Because it takes me again back to an era for which I'm nostalgic. But it's funny, because when I listen to it, I don't feel the 60s. I feel the 40s, you know? But there's this kind of romance about it. You picture yourself in old Hollywood, as if, were I alive at the time, I'd be floating around old Hollywood. You know, of course I would. Hanging out with Julie London, hitting the local club on a Saturday night, listening to her croon away the sultry jazz. 'Cause, you know, that's what my life would have been back then, of course. But it still makes me nostalgic for at least the romance of an era I never experienced and might never have existed, you know? Julie London, Love on the Rocks, 1963. Then we do one already right off the bat that kind of screws up our chronology, because this tune was recorded sometime between 1964 and 1968, but was not released until 2018. So I had a conundrum there as to where I would put Love on the Rocks by Glen Campbell. You know Glen Campbell, don't you, kids? I'm a rhinestone cowboy. I missed that note, but you've heard the song. You know Glen Campbell, a legend. All right, well, 1964 to 1968, Glen Campbell is a cat on the rise, and he has an astonishing ability to mimic Elvis. Did I ever tell you I'm the king of rock and roll? Glen Campbell could do a great Elvis. And so Elvis's writers, Ben Wiseman and Sid Wayne, come along with a whole batch of songs prepared for Elvis that they've written for Elvis. And they say, let's give Elvis the full flavor of these. Let's basically demo these tunes fully, get someone to sing them, and then we'll present them to the king, and he can decide if he wants to record them, because he can then, you know, he can hear the full flavor. He can hear what it's going to sound like. And the guy they get to sing those songs is Glen Campbell, okay? So Glen Campbell, between 64 and 68, did a whole whack of tunes that were written for Elvis, so Elvis could get the flavor, one of which was called Love on the Rocks. And this is an interesting tune, because it's got, I think, kind of a 50s sound, but a bit of a funk on it. All right, it's a bit slow, bit of a funky tune, Love on the Rocks. Lyrics are what they are. We'll get to them. And it's a cool tune. I don't mind it. I don't know if Elvis dug it or not, but it's got that kind of, if you're into 50s style, bit of funk sort of flavor on it, you might dig Love on the Rocks by Glen Campbell. I thought to myself, the intro to this song sounded a little bit Beatles to me, actually, and we're talking mid-60s here. So the influence has begun, and I don't know if they were trying to update the King's sound. Remember, at this point in time, Elvis is mostly focused on his film career. He's certainly not touring. For most of the 60s, Elvis didn't play live. He was making movies, man. Wanted to be a movie star, and he was making bad movies. Bad musical comedies is what Elvis was doing. And Elvis, by the end of that era, hated it. Dude was an artist, man. We've talked about this. Go back and listen to my one about the comeback special 1968. We talked about all this. But they're still presenting music to Elvis to record, maybe to put in the movies, whatever. The intro sounds a little bit Beatles to me, and then when the song kicks in, it sounds a little bit James Brown to me. So I'm wondering, at that point, if Wiseman and Wayne were trying to kind of update Elvis's sound, but it still had just a hint of that 50s kind of rock and roll, rockabilly sensibility. It was like a merging of Elvis's past with a possible future. And I'm probably reading way too much into this song. You know, it's okay. I don't mind it. And the lyrics are what they are. She's never home each time you call. You get the feeling she's trying to stall. Feel like you've got chicken pox. Don't call the doctor. It's a sure case of love on the rocks. Dinner ready, you pour the wine. She gets a headache about 8:45. That's not gonna work, kids. You know what he's talking about. She gets a headache about 8:45. It's time to cash in your stocks. The market's dropping, and you're headed for love on the rocks. Yeah, you're headed for love on the rocks. Yeah, I heard that, man. I felt that deep down. Not nearly as sultry as Julie London. Kind of throwaway lyrics, okay. Kind of a throwaway tune, okay. But the interesting part to me is the record itself, all right? As I said, this was released in 2018. So these tapes that were recorded in the mid-60s were thought to have been lost somewhere. For 50 years, Glenn Campbell, singing these tunes as Elvis demos, was thought to be lost forever, and then they were discovered somewhere. And they cleaned them up, and they put them together, and they created a record called Sings for the King by Glenn Campbell. It was released in 2018, and so, from out of nowhere, we get a whole new Glenn Campbell record, and in a certain sense, a whole new Elvis record. Who'd have thunk, man? And who knows what's sitting in an attic or a trailer somewhere in Nashville or in Los Angeles? The forgotten reels of who knows what. Jimi Hendrix singing Elvis demos. It could be out there, man. It could be out there. That's Love on the Rocks by Glenn Campbell, which has been streamed 21,836 times on Spotify. So it's obviously not as good as Julie London. But somehow, 21,000 people have gone out there and listened to this. Or one really big Glenn Campbell fan has streamed it 21,000 times. Then we get to the one, all right? We jump ahead 60s to 1980, and as soon as somebody says to you, Love on the Rocks, love that song, what comes to mind? What comes to mind if you're any sort of an aficionado, if you're a music history person, is Love on the Rocks by, of course, Neil Diamond. This was a tune 1980, that was included on the soundtrack to the Jazz Singer movie, all right? That soundtrack was Neil Diamond, and a lot of the critics will tell you the best part of that movie and the best part of Neil Diamond in that movie was the soundtrack. Apparently, Neil, not the greatest actor. I've not seen the Jazz Singer because, you know, if you've listened to this show for any length of time, I don't really see a lot of movies, okay? Did not grow up in movie culture, not really my thing. So I have not seen The Jazz Singer. I don't really intend to see The Jazz Singer because critics more or less panned it and panned Neil Diamond's work in it as an actor. But the soundtrack, kids, the soundtrack, that's a different story, okay? And this is Neil Diamond doing Neil Diamond. There's a reason why he's considered among the great American songwriters of all time, all right? Now, you've heard Love on the Rocks by Neil Diamond, all right? This is another one of these, we're breaking up, we're falling apart, and we're drinking about it. Because that's, I wonder if all this stuff was sponsored by alcohol companies. Maybe it was. Maybe it was. Didn't there used to be like kids shows that were sponsored by cigarette brands? Things have changed, man. So the song is sad. The song is down. The song is depressed, as you would expect it to be, all right? Here's a guy drowning his sorrows. Life is falling apart. You know, can't be with the one he loves. And, of course, it's sad. And it's one of those kind of timeless songs. You know, Neil Diamond wrote a bunch of them. Not just that he recorded, but that lots of other people recorded, too. This cat Neil Diamond is indeed one of the great songwriters of all time, and you've heard Love on the Rocks. Let's check out some lyrics. Love on the Rocks ain't no surprise. Pour me a drink and I'll tell you some lies. Got nothing to lose, so you just sing the blues all the time. First they say they want you, how they really need you. Suddenly you find you're out there walking in a storm. Don't they do that? Don't they do that, kids? They say they want you. They say they need you. And then they kick you out into the storm. I could sing a few bars of that, man. I've been in the music industry long enough to know. So, hey, it's a classic. It's a timeless. It's the quintessential Love on the Rocks. And of course, Spotify will back that up, kids. Because that song, Neil Diamond's Love on the Rocks, has been streamed 17,085,192 times. That's either a whole lot of people or one really big Neil Diamond fan, man. Maybe the record company's doing that. You know, record companies used to do this. Record companies would put out an album and then buy up all the copies to run that thing way up the charts. You know what I mean? It was a little bit of the funny business. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Maybe Neil Diamond's record company is doing all the streaming, but 17 million, dude. And the soundtrack to The Jazz Singer went platinum like 5 times. We're talking about 5 million sales here. So Neil cleaned up on the soundtrack, even if it kind of killed him as an actor. And he wrote this tune, Love on the Rocks, which remains, 40 years later, a timeless classic. But Neil wasn't the only one whose love was on the rocks in 1980, okay? Canadians were suffering too. Canadians were breaking up and Canadians were having heartbreaks. And those heartbreaks were expressed by the legendary Canadian rock band Harlequin in 1980. Remember Harlequin, kids? Harlequin is apparently still around. Harlequin. However you want to say it, in 1980, Harlequin released a record called Love Crimes, which included the song Love on the Rocks. Now, you know Harlequin. If you've ever stopped on a classic rock radio station in this country, you have heard Innocence, ba 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 ba, Innocence. You know that one, right? Innocence by Harlequin. You know it. And it's great, actually. I do not spend a lot of time on classic rock radio because as great as some of the songs are, it's like we've been hearing this for 50 freaking years. Do we need to hear it again? In most cases, probably we don't, but, we're being in Canada, got to have the CanCon, and that means you got to play some Harlequin, and Innocence, I actually really, really like. All right, Harlequin was a hard rock band, think late 70s, early 80s, and you feel that in their song, Love on the Rocks, which starts with a pretty ripping guitar riff, reminded me a bit of 70s Alice Cooper. So Ken the Zen, if you're listening, go check out Harlequin's Love on the Rocks, see if you get like an Alice Cooper flavor off of that. And it sounds a bit April Wine, and it sounds a bit Nazareth. It's late 70s, early 80s guitar rock, and it's really good, by the way. All right, catchy guitar riff, catchy chorus, and I dig this tune, Love on the Rocks, by Harlequin. But let's check the lyrics, shall we? Harlequin says you never learn from your mistakes. I don't think you're so special. The best defense was hard to take. The rest is incidental. Now that, kids, is an internal rhyme. I dig internal rhymes. You expect the rhyme to be at the end of the line. Instead, the rhyme drops into the middle. Let's hear it again. You never learn from your mistakes. I don't think you're so special. The best defense was hard to take. The rest is incidental. So we're rhyming special with incidental now. Don't come to me for help because I'm out for myself. Go find somebody else. It's all a game of give and take. You only deal in rental. You never had too much at stake. She gave her full potential. Now you're trapped within yourself. Your muffled cries of help. She breaks out of her shell. It's too bad. It's too bad. It's too bad. Love is on the rocks. Yeah, man. Love is on the rocks. Not a whole lot of drinking references here. We're talking about ships in a storm, kids. I love this line. It's all a game of give and take. You only deal in rental. Whoa. Burn. Insightful. Well done, Harlequin. I really like that lyric. That's cool. That's clever. You know, it's a little turnaround there. I dig on that. Cool song by, a Canadian band that flies somewhat under the radar, but Harlequin's still touring. As of like a few years ago, a version of that band is still out there on the road kicking it. Some really cool guitar rock from the late 70s, early 80s, before things went all glam. And Harlequin's a cool band, so check them out. Now, 1983, love was still on the rocks, man. Love was still on the rocks in 1983 for the UK-based kind of electronic disco band Llama. Llama, L-A-M-A. This band, and I found this song on a record called Italo Disco Volume 2. Italo Disco Volume 2. I don't know anything about that album. I don't know when it came out or whatever, but this song is from 1983. And Llama, I could find out almost nothing about Llama either. But apparently they were a thing. All right, back in the early 80s, we know that the disco thing kind of died in the mainstream, I guess, late 70s, in terms of what was being played on the radio. Go listen to my episode about Disco Demolition Night to talk about the trajectory of disco. But apparently in the early 80s, this kind of music kept on. You could go to the dance hall on a Saturday night, and they were still playing this disco-flavored kind of music. And this tune, Love is on the Rocks by Llama, was one of the really popular songs, apparently. Now, this was a cover. This was a cover of an Italian guy, Lucio Battisti, I don't think I'm saying that right, who was traditionally in Italy a big deal, like a super duper big star, Lucio Battisti, who recorded this song, Love on the Rocks, Love is on the Rocks, Love on the Rocks, or what became that in English, in 1976. And that tune had 100% a disco vibe. I mean, this is mid to late 70s. That was the flavor, kids. And it was funky and had this disco sound. And then you fast forward 7 or 8 years, along comes Llama, whatever Llama is, and they do what is fundamentally an instrumental version of this song. And so it is kind of electronic sounding. I dug it because I've said before, one of the things that I'm into that people might not expect is like dark wave and chill electronic music. And this kind of was a precursor maybe to some of that. So it's got an electronic sound. It's got a very repetitive kind of, think of a dance hall. And this tune was huge, allegedly, in your disco clubs in the early 80s. And so I went online, I went on the YouTube to see what I could find out. And there's a string of comments, from people who remembered it back in the day, how much they loved that tune. Love is on the Rocks, Love on the Rocks by Llama, this cover of Lucio Battisti. And I kind of like it too, because it's got just a little bit of a dark wave, kind of chill vibe to it. Sounds like the kind of song you hear in a shoe store at the mall. You ever walk into a shoe store at the mall and it's like you're walking into the future? And it's kind of weird, and they're always playing some like super hip dance music or something kind of weird and obtuse, and it's supposed to be progressive, I guess. This song makes me think of that. Or something by the Pet Shop Boys in the 80s. You know what I mean? So if you're into that kind of style, or if you just want to hear something of a novelty, Love on the Rocks by Llama. And there are lyrics to this song eventually. It's like 2.5 minutes of just dance music. And then some voices come in singing something about love is on the rocks. But I couldn't make out what the lyrics were. And of all the lyrics aggregators out there on the internet, of all the sites where you can go and check the lyrics, nobody had Llama, Love on the Rocks. But I know that they do say love is on the rocks. I'm going to assume they're talking about a ship running aground. I think that's the reference we're getting at here. I kind of dig it, and I'm not the only one, kids. Spotify says, hold on to your hats, 499,928 streams. Almost 500,000 streams on this tune, kids. Obviously, I'm not the only one who likes to dance. Well, love is on the rocks. Let's get to one you do know. This is one of the songs that got me thinking about this episode. 1988, Southern California. A bunch of dudes who look like chicks sit down to record their second album, which will be a blockbuster. And the first track on that album will be called Love on the Rocks. And it will be the biggest seller by the band Poison. Poison seems to be winning the podcast this year. It's like I'm falling over Poison everywhere I go. But the first track on Open Up and Say Ah, which gave us, among others, Every Rose Has Its Thorn, the opening track is Love on the Rocks. And what is it, kids? What is it? Well, it's a big old guitar rock song, okay? But there's a twist on this one because from what I can tell from the lyrics, Poison's not talking about drinking away your sorrows or breaking up. In fact, Poison's using the rocks, using the alcohol to get to the love. She goes down slow like a shot of gin. She's got an angel's face and a devil's grin. She kind of stared me down as I looked her up. She said, I'm your poison, now you drink a cup. Oh, ho, ho, salty. In the heat of the night is when she comes alive. She's gonna push you till she's satisfied. Ooh. I watch the ice melt fast on her red hot lips. She whispers, if you want to taste my love, why don't you swallow this? Love on the rocks, love on the rocks. She's my shot, love on the rocks. Ooh. Lick it up. And I gotta tell you, it gets worse from there. Poison weren't exactly Leonard Cohen, okay? But Poison was all about, and the era was all about having a good time, man. So what we're doing with the alcohol here is we're using it to fuel a good dang time. Things get slippery in the second verse, quite literally. It's not okay. You know, we are family entertainment like Sam Kinison here on the John Huff Podcast. Love on the Rocks by Poison. Hey, it's the lead track on a glam metal record. You know exactly what it sounds like. And Poison was all about nothing but a good time, man. So it's a fun song. Whether you dig the lyrics or not, it's a fun song. And I got a soft spot for it because back when I was a university student, in Deutsch, a Student, you know, I was taking English, I was taking history, I had to write a ton of papers, man. A ton of papers. And if you've had the experience, you know what I'm talking about. And I used to have to amp myself up to do that a lot of the time, in much the same way that I have to amp myself up sometimes to sit down and record this thing. Sometimes I got to work myself up to it, you know, want to get it right. And in order to do that, a lot of the time back in school, I would put on music. All right. I would put it on loud and I would sort of just groove to it and dig in and start writing. I can't do that anymore, by the way. I cannot write with music on. Now it distracts me. Something's changed in my brain chemistry. But back in the day, when I was young and stupid, I would put on some music loud, much to the chagrin of my neighbors, and I do offer a mea culpa for that. And I would write the paper. And a lot of the time, I would put on this record, Open Up and Say Ah. I don't know why. Maybe because it offered kind of an upbeat, happy, good time, we don't give a crap vibe. Maybe by osmosis, you know, my subconscious twigged to it all doesn't matter that much, man. We're here for nothing but a good time. Let's write this paper about John Locke. So I got a soft spot for Love on the Rocks by Poison for that reason. You know, it takes me back to a time, a difficult time, but a time when I kind of felt like I was working for something, you know? Back in school, that was the kind of lingering legacy of university for me. Felt like the work I was putting in counted for something, you know? Even if I was doing it listening to Poison. Love on the Rocks, 1988. All right. Now, who says Poison is the only band that could make a guitar rock song out of Love on the Rocks. Well, not Harlequin, obviously, but if you jump ahead 15 years or so to the year 2003, you get one of the primary reasons why I'm doing this episode right now. Now, this is Love on the Rocks with No Ice by The Darkness. Woo! I have been listening semi-obsessively to The Darkness recently, and particularly their first record, Permission to Land, which I gotta tell you right now, man, is a fabulous debut record. It's a fabulous record, period. But Permission to Land by The Darkness might have flown under your radar just a little bit, and it's time to recalibrate, all right? I've been listening to this record. It's a debut, and it's freaking fabulous, all right? One of the reasons I'm doing this episode is just so I can talk about Permission to Land by The Darkness. Now, you know this record, kinda. All right, this is 2003. You remember I Believe in a Thing Called Love. That was a massive freaking song, man. It was being played everywhere, and everybody was enjoying trying to sing that chorus, which I'm not even going to attempt here, because Justin Hawkins, whose vocals, a lot of people could, it was like a love-hate kind of thing with Justin Hawkins' vocals, because he was always singing in this high falsetto. Nobody was doing that, really, Justin Hawkins came along, and he was singing in this high falsetto, and he does it on the chorus of I Believe in a Thing Called Love, and some people dug it and some people didn't, all right? I dug it. I still dig it. And the more I listen to The Darkness, the more I realize how much power Justin Hawkins can put into that falsetto. It's really impressive, man. Not everybody can do that. And I dug that tune because it was such a breath of fresh air at the time. Let's contextualize it. It's 2003, all right? We're just coming out of what I consider a pretty weak era for rock and roll, okay? Late 90s. I don't want to dump on anybody or anybody who was kind of in their musical formative years at that time and really loves it. I found a lot of the rock and roll coming out in the late 90s to be pretty freaking bland, and I consider it kind of a down point for rock and roll in history. And now the grunge thing was over. Nu metal was about to shake it up again. And then there was a period of a couple of years where it was like, I don't know, man, this stuff seems kind of bland to me. But maybe that's just me. Maybe you loved it. I don't know. Nu metal came. It had been a long time for us, 80s guys to feel as though there was real guitar rock happening again. And a lot of us, I don't think, really dug on the nu metal, your Limp Bizkits, your Korns, etc., because of this kind of rap element. It was like, we liked some of the music maybe, didn't really, the vocals didn't really do it, at least for me. I never super duper got into that stuff. But then in 2003, along comes The Darkness with this tune that is 100% a throwback to 70s glam, a throwback to 80s glam that had so much swagger, man. Swagger had been missing from rock and roll. And along came The Darkness with this bombastic, showy, swaggery 70s glam rock sound. Nobody was doing that, man. Nobody was doing it like that in those days. And they took a lot of crap for it. Some people loved it, and some people just panned it as if it was some kind of a joke, And I listened to that tune. I checked out the record a little bit, but I just didn't go deep on it for many, many years later. And then I started going deep on it, and I was like, wait a minute. There's something going on with this record. Permission to Land is an absolute dynamite debut record. If you just look at the first 5 or 6 songs on it, Black Shuck, Get Your Hands Off My Woman, Growing on Me, I Believe in a Thing Called Love, Love is Only a Feeling. Just run those first 5 songs. Straight up, in your face, guitar, rock, like the old days, man. The first Darkness record has got a little bit of Aerosmith. It's got a little bit of Cheap Trick. It's got a healthy dose of AC/DC. And it's got a lot of Queen. It's theatrical. It's funny. It's campy. And you had to go for it, man. This is the thing. Everybody's like, well, The Darkness was just campy. Well, if you're going to do this, you got to do it all the way. I don't think you can do this halfway. I don't think you can half-ass this and pull it off. If you're going to be campy, you got to be campy. And they were, Justin Hawkins in his bodysuits with his chest out, you know what I mean? Singing in this falsetto that he sang in. If you're going for it, you got to go for it or it ain't going to land. That record, Permission to Land, no pun intended, is freaking fabulous. There's wonderful ballads. Love Is Only a Feeling. It's like, dude, it's Lighters. It's Cheap Trick. It's 1985. The song Holding My Own. Go listen to Holding My Own. Go listen. Your assignment this week is to listen to the first Darkness record, Permission to Land, from top to bottom, okay? Just put it on. Those of you who were around in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, you miss that flavor. You wish somebody modern was doing it. The Darkness was and is doing it, and they're doing it great. Permission to Land, a fabulous record, and of course the song Love on the Rocks with No Ice is on it. And that's when I started thinking about this episode, because I knew I had the Poison song, and I knew I had the Darkness song, and I knew I had the Neil Diamond song, and it was like, is there more? And there is more! I love the Darkness. I love that record. We have a connection. We have degrees of separation on the program, because early on in the show, I interviewed Emily Dolan Davis, the drummer, who for a year was the drummer in the Darkness, all right? She recorded an album with them, and she talks on our episode just about how great those cats are and how much fun she had being in that band, So if you want a little more insight on the Darkness, go listen to my Emily Dolan Davis episode. She'll tell you all about it, okay? And go onto YouTube and pull up Justin Hawkins's YouTube channel, Justin Hawkins Rides Again. Really, really compelling stuff. It's like 10-minute episodes, 13-minute episodes where he'll just talk about whatever, music. A song, a band, a thing, whatever's going on, whatever's, happening news-wise, whatever's new and just released, he'll just critique it. But he critiques it in a very generous way. It's very difficult to get Justin Hawkins to really pan something. He's always looking at it from a more generous and optimistic kind of level. And dude is a great guitar player, by the way. But he has a style and a charisma, that is all his own. He is a showman. He's articulate. He's very funny, very open, very generous about these things. His show is really compelling stuff, and I think you should go check it out. So go watch Justin Hawkins Rides Again. Go listen to Permission to Land. What do we have, by the way, for their song, Love on the Rocks with No Ice? Well, let's check the lyrics, all right? We're not as close as everybody thinks. In the eye of the storm, we keep each other warm. Love on the rocks. You'd do anything for a quiet life. Love on the rocks with no ice. Love on the rocks, you'd do anything for a quiet life. Love on the rocks with no ice. So many issues we should address, because our lives just don't correlate. All the emotions that we suppress bite our tongues until it's too late. You gotta get it out in the open, kids. If you got a problem, if you got a crack right now, you leave it, it'll be a fissure in, 4 or 5 years. Your love will be on the rocks, man. Listen to Justin Hawkins. You got to address those things. Don't suppress them. Don't bite your tongue until it's too late. And go listen to Permission to Land. I've been listening obsessively. It's a great rock and roll record by a great rock and roll band, and I think the Darkness doesn't get nearly enough credit or attention, all right? By the way, I didn't do this for Poison. 2,050,035 streams of Poison's Love on the Rocks. 2 million, kids, but then again, that is a platinum-selling record. The Darkness, Love on the Rocks with No Ice, not even one of their big songs. 2,516,110 streams. That gets the applause sound effect that I'm not going to insert right now because, royalties. Darkness doing well with that tune. And then we jump to 2007 for a much different flavor, which is Sarah Bareilles. Do you know Sarah Bareilles? You probably do. I don't know a lot about her. I haven't listened much to her. Sarah Bareilles is a big star, though. Dude, she won a Grammy. She knocked people on their butts as I believe she was Mary Magdalene in the TV production of Jesus Christ Superstar. Done some acting. She's like a piano pop kind of person, Sarah Bareilles, really, really good. One of those kind of niche artists who a lot of people are super duper into. Sarah Bareilles released an album in 2007 called Little Voice. And on that record was a tune called It Will Not Surprise You to Hear It, Love on the Rocks. Not a Neil Diamond cover, and most certainly not a Poison cover, okay? What it is, though, is one of these piano tunes that can only do what a piano tune does. Piano has a way of clanking that no other instrument has. And this song reminds me of Benny and the Jets. Think about one of those tunes that's like a slow, clanky piano tune. Bam, 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 bam. Can you hear this? Bam, bam, bam. Benny and the Jets. Bam, bam, bam. It's one of those tunes. I don't know how you describe that. It's just kind of piano pop, you know? Sarah Bareilles. And it's got just this deep groove and pocket. And only piano can do that. You know, you can have chonky guitar chords hitting on the one or whatever, or on every quarter note. They don't jangle and clang like a piano does. Only a piano creates that sound, and Sarah Bareilles does it beautifully on this song. Interesting lyrics. Too tired this time to deal with old suits you wear, ties that won't bind. Babe, baby, believe me, if I stay, it ain't gonna be easy. Okay, we'll do it your way, but this is the last time you'll hear the beautiful sound of love coming down. I love that lyric. Too tired this time to deal with old suits you wear, ties that won't bind. You see what's going on there? Kind of a double entendre thing. Kind of she weaves two concepts together. Doesn't like the old suits, and then makes a reference to ties. You wear a tie with a suit, kids. At least you did back when people were respectable. In the 1950s when you wore a three-piece to the hockey game, all right? Don't have the time, too tired to deal with the old suits you wear, the ties that won't bind. Yeah, like that divergence. Like the way she went with that. You know, it's a cool song, too. If you're into that kind of piano pop with that jangly, it's also got kind of a nightclub vibe. It's not exactly Julie London nightclub vibe, but it's got kind of a nightclub vibe, and I dig it, you know? Sarah Bareilles, very, very cool song. We got two more. I'll move through them real quick. We need some more CanCon, and we're going to go to Adam Baldwin. The great Adam Baldwin from the East Coast of Canada, who in 2016 released an album called No Telling When, precisely 1985. Got that East Coast humor, kids. Got that East Coast tongue-in-cheek. Now, I have a Adam Baldwin connection. I actually opened for Adam Baldwin and band some years ago. When I was playing with the Sarah Halabecki band, Adam Baldwin and the gang came through town. Sarah band opened for Adam. Didn't get to talk to him really, didn't get to hang out except to say hello in passing. And he and the band seemed really cool, man. Now, Adam Baldwin is an East Coast guy, singer-songwriter, but who is maybe better known as playing with Matt Mays. Matt Mays and what used to be El Torpedo. Matt Mays is freaking great. I went to see Matt Mays a few years ago. He came through L-Town, and I went to just watch and learn. Now, I went by myself to the Matt Mays show. This is like roots, Americana, indie rock and roll, and Adam Baldwin is very much the same. But Matt Mays has got, like, there was a lot of people on stage, great lights. He was wearing a cool hat. You know, it's not easy to pull off a cool hat. I love hats, all right? I'm a hat guy, but I never wear one. Hats look great on me in the store. Put on a fedora, something like that. It's like, this hat looks great. Take it outside, not so much. So I never buy the hats, but a dude like Matt Mays could actually pull off a hat. And he was wearing one on stage that was cool. You know, there was dry ice, there was lights. Looked at like $1 million, man. And Adam Baldwin was on that show playing guitar. Might have been playing a little bit of keyboards. But we're talking about Adam Baldwin's music, which is really cool. And his tune, Love on the Rocks, has, I think, a Katrina and the Waves vibe. If you think of Walking on Sunshine, the Adam Baldwin song has that kind of a flavor, all right? It's like cut time, it's upbeat, you know? And it's an indie rock tune. Indie rock tune with a saxophone solo. How you gonna beat that, kids? And it's cool, I dig it. Adam Baldwin's really, really good. You know, I really like his music. His band was cool. And this tune is fun. But what's he saying? What's he talking about? You know, love on the rocks. Adam Baldwin says, oh, won't you tell me, baby, why you making me plead? You gotta show me some mercy. Let me off of my knees. I'll take 20 years to right my wrong. Just don't keep me from my love that long. Oh, and when it hits the skids, the losers take the walk. It is what it is. It's love on the rocks. The losers take the walk, kids. Ain't that always the way? To the victor. Go the spoils, said Elaine Bennis on Seinfeld. The losers take the walk. And then there's a part that I love here for sheer continuity. He says, now I sit by the phone. I'm a-waiting to hear that beautiful voice that I made disappear. Sit by the phone, kids. Adam Baldwin. Adam Baldwin knows what it was like in the 80s. It was all about phone booths, man. All of the drama had to do with phones, and he knows it. He knows it. And in this breakup song, he's sitting by the phone because love is on the rocks. Really fun song by Adam Baldwin, and he's cool. Don't sleep on him. Check out Adam Baldwin, and I really dig that tune. It's a lot of fun. Well done, Adam. It's one of those upbeat songs that's got kind of dark, sad lyrics, you know? Monty, my pal Monty, would do that a lot. You know, he'd write a song that was just dark. And the music would be so happy. It'd be like a kid's choir singing, you know? Adam does that on this song, Love on the Rocks. And that's a cool tune. Check it out. One more to make a perfect 10. Can you believe there are this many songs that are not the same called Love on the Rocks? This one comes from a Dutch artist called Douwe Bob. D-O-U-W-E space B-O-B. Pronounced Douwe Bob. This was released in 2016 from Douwe Bob's record Fool Bar. And he was a Eurovision contestant. So he was the Dutch entry into Eurovision a few years ago. And I think his music's got that kind of Euro flavor, Euro pop kind of flavor. This tune is interesting though, because it's slow, super trippy, super spacey, Love on the Rocks. And it doesn't have that kind of dancey pop flavor that you might have expected from like a Eurovision thing or a Euro artist. It's really spacey, really weird. And I kind of like it, actually. You know, spacey stuff is not my general vibe usually. There are like string parts running through this. I don't know if they're actual strings or keyboards. Doesn't matter, because it's actually really, really cool. And I forgot the Spotify thing. Man, I'm letting you down here, kids. Sarah Bareilles, Spotify, check this out. 4,071,145 streams. Sarah Bareilles, 4 million streams of her Love on the Rocks. Adam Baldwin, tough to compete with that. But for an East Coast Canadian, 57,000 streams of his Love on the Rocks. Good for you, Adam. I wouldn't mind 57,000 streams of this episode, so good on you, man. Now we come to Douwe Bob, Eurovision contestant, and people really love this. Like, you go on YouTube, you read the comments on his Love on the Rocks, and people are just like, it's so sad, it's so haunting, you know, and it really affects me, and that's what you want the music to do. Streamed on Spotify 421,700 times, so it must be good. Douwe Bob, kind of a cool tune. So if you're into a little bit electro-spacey, check out Douwe Bob. If you're into electro-disco-y, go back to Llama. If you like the rock and roll, you're looking at Harlequin. You are looking at The Darkness. You're looking at Poison. If you like more of a piano or kind of nightclub jazz vibe, you're looking at Julie London. You're looking at Sarah Bareilles. And if you want the all-time classic, I guess you're going to Neil Diamond, kids. You know what I mean? Love on the Rocks. Who knew there were so many tunes called Love on the Rocks? And who knew? I knew so many artists are struggling so badly in their relationships. But I've seen it from the inside, so I kind of get it. 55 minutes, just like that. Kaboom! Got to do the Patreon plug. If you've hung this long, maybe you're enjoying what I'm doing after all. If you followed me up to the almost hour mark, maybe you appreciate what I'm doing. I do have a Patreon page for this program. It is patreon.com/JohnHuffPodcast. And it exists so that you, if you are so inclined, can support me in the work I'm doing, okay? There are expenses connected to this program. I'm trying to offset them with the Patreon. I don't like to do ad reads. If you're listening, you know I find ad reads not just intrusive on the show, but often very insincere. And it's ad reads, man, you know? I don't want to do ad reads on the show. And I want to give people the opportunity to help me if they want to. And that's what I love about Patreon, kids. It is voluntary. You're not obligated to anything. I have one tier of membership. It is $5 a month. You can think of it as slipping me a $1.25 tip for every episode that I do. You know, if you enjoy what I'm doing, if you're getting something out of this, if you're being entertained, if you're being educated, you know, if you're being pumped up just a little bit, if you're getting something out of what I'm doing, please consider supporting me on Patreon and supporting other independent programs, artists, etc. You know, big money is coming into podcasting. Big celebrity, big companies are taking over the space. Very tough for the indies to kind of get an elbow in. You know what I mean? We have to use alternative routes. We don't have the big money behind us. So we do things like Patreon so that we can, you know, generate the resources. And if you're inclined to support on Patreon, I am inclined to give you my eternal gratitude. I am going to start doing something on the Patreon site, and I don't know what yet. But I want to thank everybody who has signed up so far. Warms my cockles. I very, very much appreciate it. Thank you so much. And if you don't want to support that way, that's totally cool. The podcast remains free and accessible wherever you enjoy fine podcasts. That's no problem. You can support me by sharing the episodes, by telling a friend. And I will ask again, ratings and reviews on your podcast platform of preference. Don't say that without a pop filter. Really do help, all right? The easiest thing you can do to help me, share the episode, go drop me a rating on your favorite platform, preferably a positive rating. A review would be lovely, warms my cockles, lets people know that there's something worth hearing on this program. And I hope there is, and I hope there has been today. Bit of an experiment, but once I started digging into how many freaking songs there are called Love on the Rocks, I thought it became worth talking about. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're having a good week. Hope your summer's going well. Hope you're listening to good music. And if you are, I want to know about it, okay? I will put all of these tracks, all of them, on the John Huff podcast, referenced on the podcast 2022 playlist. You can go run them one after the other. I'll put them in order. You can hear what I'm talking about. And if I missed one out there, let me know, because there are probably more. You know, I just didn't find them all. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you supporting. I hope you're doing well. And hey, I'll check you later. Yeah. She goes down slow like a shot of gin. Ba-dum-bum. But she got an angel's face and a devil's grin. Ha ha. Well, she kind of stared me down as I looked her up. Glenn Campbell should have done that one. Elvis would have crushed Love on the Rocks by Poison.